QFHSA table. Okay, Brian, up to you.
Thank you, Rosemary. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to do, first of all, the land acknowledgement. This virtual meeting is being held throughout the province of Quebec on traditional unceded territories of the Assembly of First Nations of Quebec. The rules for this evening. We're asking everyone to follow the procedures. All attendees' microphones will be muted during the presentations. Questions during the meeting should be posted in the chat and will be answered first. After the presentations let's do that sentence again. Questions during the meeting should be posted in the chat and will be answered first after the presentations in the priority in which they were received. Microphones will be unmuted after the presentations to allow questions. Please signify your intention to pose a question by using the raise hand feature in Zoom. And I'd like to acknowledge present tonight of Tino Borodino, who is the chairman of the Advisory Board on English Education. Like to acknowledge Dr. Richard Boudis, who is the professor emeritus from the Department of Psychology, Université de Québec à Montréal. Like to acknowledge Dr. Mela Sarkar, who is Associate Professor, Department of Integrated Studies and Education, McGill University. Dr. Dorothy Williams, famous as the creator of the ABCs of Canadian Black History. And I will mention others who arrive, because I think some people who have indicated that they're going to be coming. There are other meetings, of course, going on tonight, and some people said that they would be joining us later. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Linton Garner. Linton Garner is well known. He is presently the executive director of the Heritage College CEGEP in Gatineau. He is a former attaché of the Minister of Education. He is also, now with Linton, you got to write down all the things that he's involved with. He's the immediate past president of the Quebec Federation of Home and School Associations. Here we are, okay. He is also a member of the Cross-Cultural Roundtable on Security of Public Security Canada. And he's also a partner with the Western Quebec School Board. So I don't know how Linton has time to be with us tonight, but welcome, Linton, and we always appreciate your implication.
Thank you, Brian. And just one small correction. I'm not the executive director of the college, but I am, or the school board. I am the executive director of the CEGEP, Heritage College Foundation, which is, an organization that's arm's length from the college, but where we raise money to support students, while they're at Heritage College. But thank you all very much for being here, and I really am looking forward to the discussion tonight. We are particularly looking at the issue of racism in the education milieu. Most of the people who are around the table, people who are speakers, represent some kind of association with educational institutions. But we also have a number of people from the city of Montreal, for instance, and other institutional sectors. So I would like to maybe make a little round table of the presenters that we are having tonight for your listening enjoyment. I would first like to acknowledge Ms. Letitia Taylor, who is both the president of the Heritage College Foundation, a chairperson of there, and a member of the Western Quebec School Board Council. As well, she chairs a number of the committees that are attached to the council. As well, we have Mr. Michael Farkas, who is associated with both the city and a community organization in Little Burgundy, which just at the moment escapes my mind. I'll let Michael introduce himself.
You wanted to say youth in motion, I believe.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Excuse me. All right, to be able to say youth in motion. We have Mr. Reginald Fleury, who is here representing the city of Montreal. He's agreed to replace Madame Menayi, from the city, and to join us and be with us here. We also have Mr. Alex Adrian, who is the president of the Quebec Board of Black Educators, who I have a particular connection to, and really I'm looking forward to hearing more about what the Quebec Board of Black Educators is doing. And then Dr. Myrna Lashley, professor from McGill University, and certainly well known for her work in the issue of institutions and their approaches to eradicating racism within their policies and practices, having worked with the Service Déontologie, the police service, Lester B. Pearson School Board, English Montreal School Board, and so her participation will be very informative. So if you allow me a personal note.
Okay, Mr. Gardner, don't forget Commissioner Saunders.
Excuse me. I missed her. I was trying to scroll through everybody. Excuse me, Commissioner Saunders. Thank you for being with us. I know that there are some means from the school board this evening, and I'm really glad that you've taken the time to be here with us. All right. So on a sort of a personal note, I want to start with where it sort of began. And for me, that's with the Quebec Board of Black Educators. I am myself a graduate of the first Quebec Board of Black Educators formal summer school program called the Costa Hall. That was then established in connection with the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal. That was before we turned over from confessional to linguistic school boards. At the time, numbers of members of the Black community, number of educators like Dr. Bertley, Dr. Willis, Clarence Payne, all had understood that the Black community was victims of a system of what you called streaming. All the new arrivals of people as we were beginning in the late 60s and early 70s with the arrival of the West Indian community, they were being placed in a level of schooling that didn't allow for there to be a progress onto post-secondary education. Obviously, there was a bias that was there, and there was a system, an institutional framework that didn't recognize the equality of the Black population within its ranks, and both in the Catholic school system as well at the time. The opportunities for Black students to be able to go on to post-secondary education was indeed very limited. and in fact, in many cases, impossible because their credits weren't enough to be recognized by the universities, and at the time we were in the second year of the establishment of the CEGEPs. So neither of those institutional bodies, those institutional levels, recognized a lot of the schoolwork that was done by members of the Black community because they weren't pointed towards post-secondary education. The Quebec Board of Black Educators came into existence to be able to rectify that situation, established particularly with the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal, to run summer schools, and certainly they have continued on that path since 1970 to provide additional educational structuring for members of the Black community so they can be prepared to go on to post-secondary education. So I would like to be able to invite Mr. Alex Adrian to talk about the development of the Quebec Board of Black Educators and the roles in which I guess the agreements that have been made across the school boards with the QBBE, how they have helped and established and promoted a better opportunity for young Black students to move on to post-secondary education. So if you will, Alex.
Thank you, Linton, for the introduction. I thought I was going to throw you and reveal to the audience a personal connection that we had with the Costa Hall Summer School, but I see you proudly, every chance you get, to say that you are one of the first and I guess most illustrious graduates.
You are not the most illustrious for sure, but certainly one of the first.
Thank you very much. In trying to frame the conversation tonight in terms of fighting and promoting anti-racism, I wanted to just go back quickly and perhaps go over some of the historical events that led to the social condition that allowed an organization for the Quebec Board of Black Educators to be formed, because it was not only a partnership with the Protestant School Board of Greater Montreal, but Dawson College also, and to this day is again a former, and of course the Ministry of Education, which allows us to give exams, ministry exams and remedial courses over the summer for students to get a credit. But in trying to understand the social, and we know in the 60s, especially late 60s with the crisis at Concordia Library and the whole social movement that was going around the world, I finally began to understand the conditions that led to the QBBE to be able to be formed. First, and it's of course, it's through my many conversations with one of our founders, Dr. Clarence Bain, when we would go over some of the conditions, we realized that after World War II, when a lot of the colonies in the West Indies were getting their independence and the expatriates were coming back to England, there was a need to create space for these expatriates to come back. So that's when pressure was put on Canada to relax its immigration laws that was predominantly restricted to European immigration until the early 60s. So when the slow migrations of people from the West Indies, French and English, came to Montreal, they noticed there was an absence of Blacks, especially in post-secondary education. But I've always felt that I don't know if the conditions would happen today if the government would unite to form the QBB, but I realized that at the time, it was also La Révolution Tranquille, and it was a network of CEGEP that was opening. So the conditions for governments to relax access to post-secondary education was something that benefited them in the long run, and of course benefited the Black community at large. Why I bring this twist, and of course it's my own interpretation of history. Réginald, perhaps tu pourras nous en donner un peu plus long sur les conditions de l'époque, but ideally I wanted to bring the time, the era, just to frame for the sort of the time that we are evolving now, and what are those conditions that would allow us again to move forward and in combating racism. At the end of the day, it's not tolerating. It's about social justice. Whenever there's an injustice in part, people of reasonable I guess a predisposition should react against it. Now, it's also, discrimination is also very multi-layered and multifaceted. So how do you deal with it? You deal with it on a day-to-day basis, of course. People of color, we know, we've learned how to deal with it. But how do you make sure that in the systems there are checks and balances in place to make sure that those that have certain dispositions, certain biases or discriminations are not free to act freely and allow the discrimination, the prejudice to overcome and impact the workplace. So we are concerned, and I do believe that I had at the Council of Commissioner of the Lester B. Pearson School Board reiterate the fact that I think until school boards are ready to tackle the fact to have an anti-Black racism policy, then we can begin to have the consequences, or not even the consequences, but so much the accountability that goes with action. Now, I know being a former principal that we always have anti-bullying policies. We have LGBTQ, there's certain concept that you cannot. But I do believe, not that the indigenous brothers don't need to have to stand on their own, but I do believe because of the rise of what we see, the aggressive nature of anti-Black racism in the schools, in the classrooms, needs to be checked, there needs to be checked and balances in a system that does not allow freely. If you look at the overrepresentations of Black in the schools, in the social services system, it's a direct relationship with what's the term that I'm looking for? Racial profiling that has been done in schools, and not people that don't understand, are not looking at certain situations through the cultural lens, and they feel that no, this should be it should be signaled. So I'm concerned more in terms of what can we do to move forward. I know historically these things go back and forth. We see the rise of racism around the world, and it's on the rise. So we need to combat it, and that's why I'm happy to be part of this roundtable to hear about how we can strategize and move the conversation forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian. Your points are well taken, and I hope we're going to pursue some of those as we move forward during the evening. One of the other sort of key areas in terms of the community trying to get the society, and particularly at the time the Montreal community, to move forward on anti-racism gestures. I believe that the city of Montreal was really one of the first groups to establish an intercultural and interracial relations committee to look at the issue and establish a department. But one of the earliest people who had been involved with development of the activities, and the programming at the city of Montreal is Michael Farkas, and as he mentioned, he has that perspective of not only the community organization like Youth in Motion, but working in one of the traditional communities in Montreal for the Black community, but as well from the perspective of the city of Montreal, and having established and been a long time caretaker of the Black History Month celebrations at the school, along with the calendar that has recognized the contributions of many Black people in terms of their contributions to Montreal and Quebec society. So I would like to call on Michael to talk a little bit about his work and on the efforts that both his community organization and for the time that he was at the city of Montreal, those efforts to combat anti-Black racism. Michael?
Yes, thank you, Linton. Just would like to precise that I don't work for the city because he said that a few times. I'm wondering.
Well, I've always made a connection, sorry, in terms
Yeah,
of
well,
your mind.
through the round table, we have close ties because we have to put on the month, and we actually the commissioner, is she with us? The commissioner for the fight against racism.
Mr. Fleury is here who
would be me
who is
for tonight.
representing her because Madam Manias recently had a death in her family
Okay.
and was unable to participate.
Okay, thank you. So, Monsieur, well, I can't wait to hear him. Okay, so basically, yeah, so basically we follow the trail of pioneers like you, Linton, and others like Clarence Bain, and help me here if I forget some key words.
Carl Whitaker.
Carl Whitaker, that's who I was looking for. That petitioned the city a while back. I mean, Lise Hamilton, all those guys get.
Leroy Butcher.
Thank you. Before my time a little, but obviously they've left their mark that they've reached. Those names have stayed with me too as I've looked at sometimes their work. I was able to do that at a certain case. So basically, when the petitions went out to honor, to recognize the Black History Month in Montreal, it was at the time that Jean Doré was in power. And this group, you were probably part of it, was lobbying the city of Montreal to have Black History Month recognized, and of which they did in 1992, actually. So
yes.
we often, we know the feds with Senator Jean Augustine did it in 95 officially, but Montreal had already committed to recognize Black History Month from 1992. I just wanted to add that. So I'm just following the footsteps. I was able to be on the board under when Mrs. Elizabeth Denville was then president for a number of years also.
Yes.
Ashton Mendez and so on, Georges Connon, etc. And since 2009, we were able to, I positioned myself to be there also, as I was already on the board, but I was elected at the executive to become the chair, and it was a time of where we could refresh also with the whole technology that was really advancing around 2009, 2010, and we had beautiful people like the younger generation, Carla Beauvais, Nadia Rousseau, that's still with us. So they were able to bring us to modernize a bit the round table, and that's been very helpful, and we haven't stopped since then. On the topic of tonight, obviously, so I have different hats. That's why maybe Linton got a bit. I mainly work at Youth in Motion for all these years. I'm the director in an inner city Black center of in the heart of where it all started for Black folks, which is Little Burgundy. So we're still here, even though the Black community is on posters, but they've also moved around, but there's still a lot of ties and a lot of how could I say, the people feel really attached to Little Burgundy in many ways, being the blueprint with the different institutions that came out, just to name the Union United Church, UNIA, NCC, and so on. So definitely Youth in Motion, DESTA. TNL is not necessarily a Black organization, but an English one, a very honorable and venerable institution at TNL St. George that maybe some of you definitely know. So are still very much in function in Little Burgundy. So we're definitely playing our part in terms of, but it's a neighborhood that has changed, the gentrification, people have moved around, there's different communities, whether it's the Southeast Asian community that is all over Montreal has also found a niche here. And recently, in the last 10 years, we can say people that come from the Maghreb have also found a home in Little Burgundy, just to name two groups, but it's a melting pot of different people. So at Youth in Motion, it's an inner city youth center for kids 12 to 18 years of age. And obviously that demographic and that social fabric has evolved, has changed with people going, coming. But so I also work at CEDA, which is a Centre d'Éducation des Adultes. I have a program for children in the arts, as I'm a big advocate for, for sports, definitely, but definitely I use culture and arts. So we have breakdance, hip hop dance. I do the music class, and we have arts in which we strongly believe that can answer. That can empower the youth, that can solidify the youth. So those are the things we use as preventive methods for everything from socializing to also addressing, questions of racism and discrimination. So we stand tall, and I'm also a senior mediator at where I'm standing here at the famous project BUMP, the Burgundy Urban Mediation Project.
Mhm.
That has been initially was the Black Family Support Group, also
Right.
with Mr. Wright and Rosemary Segui. They founded this. I was part of the first cohort, and now I'm back here as a senior mediator. And it's Prévention Sud-Ouest that is the fiduciaire, that is the organization that holds the department of BUMP. But BUMP program that's well known. In some ways across Canada also, because it's people wonder, how do you go in people's house? How do you talk to kids that are more at risk on the street, and that are sometimes involved in serious crimes and everything. So we do that kind of work here at BUMP, and we've been doing it for a number of years, and I'm part of the team. So it's basically it's mediation, it's mediation in open spaces, in public spaces. So we're big on the summer. Again, I bring back the culture and arts. That's why I'm big on events, whether it's Emancipation Day in the summer, the Burgundy Festival. We're up to our 39th edition. So things like that. I even started Canada Day, even though it's controversial, but it's to actually open up a channel with the First Nation groups. Actually, there's a center here, a residential center for women right here, that's the old Hush and Bath. And I'm doing a Black History Month event tomorrow night that will lead on maybe to do barbecues, a form of powwow, and they'll be presented. The natives and Inuits will be presented to the community, as there still are very. Actually, they came in and everybody thought it would be like like the homeless problem that we have on the street, and they've been so quiet, so discreet, so human-like. So we have to change to answer a bit the solutions. We need to change all our, even our. Yes, there's a lot of Inuits and people on the street living in dire but they're not all like that. And this is a great project financed by Mark Miller, financed by the City of Montreal. So I'm working more and more with these groups also that are new arrivants in Little Burgundy. And so basically what I can say, when I saw the invitation, Mr. Brian and Mr. David Cromwell, I don't really use those. There's a lot of words that they really get to me that I don't use, and I'm not talking about the N-word. I would use the N-word way before using. So yeah. We won't go there necessarily unless it's asked to me later on. But that's not the word that really bothers me for many reasons. Because I always question where were you when all our kids were singing, were using the word in heavy rap, and still are to a certain extent. Where are you when they do use the N-word? And no one is denying, but people can actually lose their job in universities while our kids are using the N-word in abundance.
All right.
That's something I would like to, but mainly when I saw anti-racism and anti-discrimination, oh, okay, here we go. For me, I know what they mean, and I totally agree with Alex that there's a recrudescence, there's a multi of racism all over the place. I see it, I feel it. I'm also, we don't know why, even though everyone's talking the good talk, we've never seen so many Black folks to say on commercials in Quebec. So we're happy for that. But at the same time, we know that other groups lately, as we know the problem in the Middle East, have been subject to heavy racism and discrimination. So we know it's far from over. And so we need to be in solidarity. But I just find those words just so unpleasant that you'll rarely hear me use those words, because anti is antique. You know what you know.
Mhm.
So we're going to talk about the Antichrist. You know, and I thought about those words. You know, because we're living the times. I hear a lot of people around me talking. We're
Thank
living in the time of the Antichrist. So
Mhm.
you go with all these words that don't really please me. I'm wondering, when are we going to fix the problem? Because obviously, I use universal values. I use peace and love. I
Mhm.
use an understanding that the ones that are practicing anti-racism, are practicing racism, sorry, and discrimination, prejudice, are in heavy denials. I'll talk for Black people again. Black folks, when we're a minority, we don't everybody accepts us. But put us in a room that we're majority, and you guys are, you know, the
Mhm.
minority is the others. Wow, everyone flies.
Well,
They ain't ready. They ain't ready yet. They ain't ready.
they're certainly not. Well,
They're not.
and I would
And
really, Michael, I would really like to come back to that
yeah,
point.
okay. Okay.
All right, because and discuss that thread that you're talking about, because it was
Yeah.
something that Alex touched on too, and so let's see if other individuals who are here to present as well sort of move along that line and move that thread. And so what I would really like to do now is to introduce everyone to Letitia Taylor. As I said, she's the chairperson of the Heritage College Foundation. She is a member of the council at the Western Quebec School Board. She is a parent representative and as well sits on multiple committees such as the Intercultural and Racial Relations Committee, the Anti-Racism Committee, amongst others. And I'd ask her to say, a few words about the issues of racism and discrimination within the educational system, and perhaps talk about some of the other issues pursuant to that. I must as well, say that she, like myself, is an expatriate American, and so we both have the benefit of experiencing racism in both countries, and where and in particular where Canadians often feel that, and as they might have asked you, many of us people around the table who are persons of color, it's not as bad as it is in the United States, is it? So Letitia, I leave you with that.
Well, you've marked me now amongst Canadian colleagues here. I always try to keep that on the down low, at least at first. So good evening. I'm very pleased to be here and to share some perspective. I would say that my role, the two roles primarily that I'll be drawing on in terms of my contributions this evening are as a parent commissioner for elementary within the Western Quebec School Board. I am in that role the very first Black person to serve at the highest level of governance in the school board in its more than quarter century history. And of course, before that, when there was a Protestant board, I think actually we inherited the Catholic board legacy, but that has being the first and being the only has been an experience. And it was such an experience that I was compelled to introduce a resolution to recruit two co-opted commissioners. We had 3 Indigenous commissioners, one at a time, who all left the board with the same testimony, which was after being tested which was that nothing ever moves, and that things just didn't seem to there was a lot of talk, a lot of sort of rhetorical commitments, but in terms of experiences, they felt tokenized and not really taken seriously. And so I am the first Black person to serve at this in any form of leadership or governance. And there are, in the year of our Lord 2024, 0 members of who are racialized or Indigenous. Well, there's one now, vice principal. But I've I introduced a resolution to have co-opted commissioners, one racialized and one Indigenous, so that I would not be the only person speaking up to these issues of anti-racism and to those positive values of inclusion and really sharing power, sharing influence, and sharing perspectives. And I think that has it has we as a result of that resolution, Linton came to us, and the executive director of the Maniwaki Friendship Native Center were added. The 2 of them were added last year. And the Intercultural Relations and Education Committee was established. And everyone has been shocked, just shocked that the vision we bring and the projects we initiated within 3 months. Last year, the committee was established in March of 2023, and apparently we were moving so fast that the wind was messing up everyone's hair. It was, I think, the next move has been, and it's amazing. Racism doesn't get smarter. It doesn't really evolve. Some of the things that I have seen and heard remind me of the 70s, 1970s in the US. There are ways in which, because conversations are so difficult to have, they're not Canadian nice. There are aspects of the racial status quo that remind me of 50 years ago in the States. Things that are sort of said and done, and with the approach that people are to be actions and attitudes and words are to be judged by the professed good intentions of the of individuals, as opposed to the impact on communities, on families, on our students, where we've really had to the perspective that's brought is sort of, look at all the good things that are happening at our schools. So we really don't need to address the fact that there is almost unbroken whiteness at every level of governance and leadership in our institution, and everything must be okay because look, the kids are getting to have Black History Month. We're celebrating this and we're doing that, and I've always said our students are like light years ahead of us. The adults are running to catch up. And it's a bit like, from the vantage point of a racialized person who's been Black and a woman all my life. It's like watching, I'm not even trying to herd the cats. I'm just watching them run in all directions. And it's, but there's a lot of pushback because we've not come to sit at the table and mind our knitting and just be grateful to be there. Where we've said we need to make a difference. We need to speak for those who aren't in the room. And it's not just, whether it's Black students and families, whether it's Indigenous students and families, whether it's students with special needs, all around those equity issues. I think I am one of maybe just a handful of commissioners that actually comes to the table and makes resolutions. And so now we have there is a plot afoot to introduce a new procedure. I'll be calling you tomorrow morning, Brian, to figure out how to field this, but just to slow us down. So it's, if you have a resolution, you have to wait a month. You have to tell us it's coming at one meeting, and then we don't have to talk about it or vote on it until the next meeting. Whatever. But it's very it's been gratifying in the sense that I can turn to my daughter and say, who just graduated, and ask her. She's my she's my plumb line. She's the one that I'm asking. Does this make sense? Would this have made a difference? Are you proud of the initiatives and the projects and so forth that we're bringing forward? Do you feel like it'll make a difference to your colleagues who you've left behind? And I think really getting that student voice to say, what difference are we making to our students who are being erased because their names aren't Quebecois enough, and so they won't be spoken by their teacher for an entire school year, or who are being racially profiled in their classrooms in front of their classmates, or who have don't feel comfortable enough in their skin to stay in class, but prefer to get their classwork and go and work someplace else. What difference are we moving the needle in that way? And how are we empowering parents to understand a school system that is sometimes very opaque, not intuitive? How are we equipping them to be able to advocate effectively for their students? And so my other role as vice chair of Parents for Diversity, which is headquartered in Ottawa, but operates in the National Capital Region, both sides of the Big Water, I call it. And we are doing the work of having training parents even to be peer advocates so that they can intervene on behalf of other parents when they're hearing about some things that are going on in the school system, different school systems. We're doing workshops. We're been very focused on Black families and Black students in this last year or two, and just hearing stories of 5-year-olds who after relentless mocking are cutting their own hair, cutting their dreadlocks off, at 5, taking scissors to themselves, who are having, remarks made, not just the N-word, but remarks about, what color their skin is and how it resembles different things. It just denigrating, dehumanizing things that our kids are being exposed to, are having to endure, that they're having to gather their courage and their equilibrium around themselves in order to be able to face going to school. And that very often, the disproportionate discipline that's not even signaled to parents. Your child can get an in-school detention and they don't have to tell you. It's the lack of accountability and so forth. It's there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work to do. I'm encouraged though, because parents and students themselves and allies and teachers are they're leaning in, and they're saying, you know, this is unacceptable, and it's not normal, and we are not we're not the ones who have pathology issues to address. The pathologies that we're encountering stem, I think, directly from the unwillingness to engage with our humanity in any genuine way. And so not understanding or accepting that, you know, all this happy talk and all the happy, you know, activities that we have for students do not compensate for the violence and the experience of denigration that our students are enduring. And so
Mhm.
we want to do better. We need
We need to do better.
more and more people
Mhm.
to lean in.
Thank you, Letitia. You know, that's very interesting, and I think that you know, we're going to follow up, you know, up with that issue as well. I'd like to move on to you know, perhaps Dr. Myrna Lashley here, who has been working with the institutions and working with the higher management structures, developing studies, working with them to respond to some of the issues that actually you've been bringing up, Letitia, and what others have. And I wonder, Dr. Lashley, if you would talk about your experience, you know, briefly with institutions and talk about whether their reticence or or you know, or their willingness to be able to change, and whether you've been able to see any effective change on the part of the response of institutions to demands such as Letitia and other parents of children of color to you know, to change their systems to reflect some of the issues that children of color are facing within their system.
Mhm. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. I seem to be having some problems with Zoom, which I've never been having before, so I don't know if it's my computer or if it's Zoom. So
And we can
if
see you and hear you very well.
well, I just hope that I don't crash out now.
Okay.
I have been working at this level with policies and institutions for years. As a matter of fact, I was the chair of the cross-cultural roundtable on national security that on which you sit right now, Linton. For, you know, I was the chair of that for 10 years, and bringing in the issues of race and racism into those systems is not always easy. What I've found is that, and there's no blame being ascribed to anybody. What I've found is that sometimes we get so frustrated and so angry, and we go in and we want things to change and we want them to change fast. And why shouldn't we? These are our children we're talking about. But I always say to myself, you know, it took years to get into this mess. We're not going to get out of it overnight. It's going to take a while. I don't want to be overly personal, but I think Matt Layton, to when you and I were working at juvenile diversion, and you know, and we didn't get things changed right away. We had to keep plugging up. You keep plugging and you keep plugging, and the movement that you see is often very small. But even though it's small, it's not insignificant, because what keeps me going is that I often look back to where I was and where I am. I look back to what things used to be. I look back to the fact that when I went to university in Florida, I went down there with 12 other Canadians. I was the 13th, and I was the only white person, the only Black person. And the hotel owner, the Sands Hotel, because we were on our way to Key West to oceanographic school there. And the hotel owner, the manager of the hotel came and said to everyone else, well, the white people can stay, but the black person, he didn't call me black back then, you know, has to
Mhm.
get out. And where I was put up was down in this hotel with mold growing on the wall. And what I found interesting was that I was with the Navy at the time. So the commanding officer said, well, if she has to leave, we're all leaving. There's no way the rest of us are going to stay here. And what was interesting to me was that I started off with these people being my friends while we were serving here in Canada. But the minute that happened, all of a sudden, it's almost as though it became my fault that they couldn't stay
Mm.
in this fancy hotel. And I think back to that. And I think now to the fact that I can walk into any hotel and nobody is going to say you can't stay here because of the color. Even if they think it, they can't say it. So I always look back to where I was and to where I am, and people ask me if there's been movement. And I can say, yes, I can see that there's been movement because I can see where it was to where it is. That being said, Letitia is absolutely correct when she says that the movement hasn't been as much as we would have liked it to be. Now, when I first took over, I know Allison's here. When I first went to the Lester B. Pearson and I was asked to head up that task force, I met with the board, and the one thing that was very clear to me was that there were no Black people on that board, not
Mhm.
one. And first thing I said to them was, before I touch this thing, you guys got to call some kind of special election and get that fixed. And you know, we got Malik and Allison at that point. It was a time when and this was just a few years ago, when I went in and they were only talking about racism, but nobody was talking about intersectionality. Nobody was talking about the fact that, you know, Black kids, Indigenous kids, whatever kids, that they come with all this intersectionality of race, ethnicity, religion, abilities. They really had a binary way of looking at it. Our task force was able to get them to see that that is not a good way to look at things.
Mhm.
That, you know, everybody comes with all these intersectionalities. You can't just say, this is the Black side over here, this is the white side over here. What do you do with a kid, therefore, who's Black and has learning challenges? You know, you have to look at the intersectionality. And we were able to get them to do that. So if you look at that report, you'll see that it covers, we touched upon all these things and pulled them all together. What I'm seeing at the Lester B, let me talk about that first, is that they set up committees. Some are functioning better than others. I mean, I'm sure Allison will tell you that. Some are functioning better than others, but I got a policy paper from them a couple of weeks ago where they said, these are the things we intend to do. Can you look over it and get back to us? Tell us if we're going in the right direction, what do we need to fix? That for me is progress. It means that I'm seeing some kind of movement.
Mhm.
Over at the English School Board of Montreal, they've taken a different perspective on it, whereas they're going to write as they go. Whereas at the Lester B. Pearson, the task force did the work and gave in the report. I think we gave them over 100 recommendations. I mean, it's quite a large report. But at the English School Board, we're writing as we go. And I'm telling them, you always have to go back to the parents. I'm not doing one more thing until I get feedback from the parents and from the community.
Mhm.
At the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, what we did there, we started off with a survey and we asked the parents, all the administrators, all the employees, all the students for their feedback on what they thought the issues were and how they should be addressed. 3 different school boards, 3 different ways of approaching the same problem. And I highlight that because there is no such thing as one
One way to
size
do
fits
things,
all.
right.
It does not work. You have to tailor it to what the situations are and put it into context.
And well, I'd like to leave you there, Myrna, because I think that's, you know, one of the issues that I'd like to take up with Mr. Fleury from the city.
Okay,
All right, because it is the kind of, I think the approach that the city took, understanding that they needed to hear from more voices than just one, one voice, and that there may be different approaches to be able to, resolve the issue. And so I'm wondering, Mr. Fleury, if you would be able to talk a little bit about what it is that the city of Montreal is doing, how its committee is working, and are you observing the intersectionality issue that Dr. Lashley has talked about, and are you hearing from different voices from different domains, and are you implementing or putting those into practice within the policies and practices of the city of Montreal?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mr. Garner. Hi, Myrna. Good to see you again.
nice to see you.
Let me start by sharing with you my background as an educator.
Mhm.
I'm a teacher. I taught in Commission Scolaire de Montréal for 10 years, and then another 15 years, I was a pedagogical advisor, specializing in anti-racism, integration of immigrant students. And the main problem, which is the same in education and in the city, is recognition of the problem. Even though research has shown in the education system that Black students are more often excluded from classes, more often suspended from school as a disciplinary measure, more often labeled as children with behavioral problem, excluded from selective problems, from selective programs. There was no way for parents, even though they knew there was a problem, to file complaints. Now there's a new commissioner, the new ombudsman that's been put in place for the whole national education system, but it hasn't been put in place because of racism. It's been put on because children were victims of sexual violence by the educators.
Mhm.
And this shows how deep the problem of recognizing violence that's being made to kids is deep within the whole system. So my first suggestion as an educator and for the education system, we should, as Black parents, file as many complaints as we can to surge that ombudsman, to have him to have them to actually monitor and have to respond to the racism that is endemic in the educational system. Now to move on as what the city is doing. I'm not representing the city here. I work for the Bureau of Fight Against Racism and Systemic Discrimination. I am an infiltrated agent of Black people within the city. We have no power, actually. We cannot decide, we cannot suspend, we cannot take decisions, but we can recommend. And what we actually do is we find the allies, find the people from within who are willing to make some changes. And one of the big change that we've just made, which is something that's been adopted in last November, is the way to treat complaints. Complaints from within, complaints from employees who are victim of other employees, of their bosses, of microaggressions, of discriminations, of jokes. And one of the major things that we did is to make every manager responsible for the climate of his team. So now they can no longer ignore complaints. They can no longer push them under the carpet saying it was just a joke. We've also had an outside organism treat and do the inquiries on the complaints, which is the Commission de la Fonction Publique.
Mhm.
So these are some of the changes that I think are parallel between the education system and the city to bring those changes is make people accountable. Thanks.
All right, great. So, along those lines of making people accountable, I'd like to talk, excuse me, to Allison. As a commissioner at the Lester B. Pearson School Board, and Dr. Lashley talked about how she's been queried now to to take a look at it, at whether what they're doing is helpful, is it good, or are they on the right track, or what other recommendations should they have? Tell us about how that's, how that was formulated, how that report was received, first of all, and then how have you been able to work with the other commissioners and the school board in trying to implement or get a handle on the recommendations that came out of Dr. Lashley's report?
So some great questions in there and some great commentary it's been an awesomely interesting panel. So to what Dr. Lashley put forward, she noticed she wanted to do the work, but would be hand delivering this task force report to a group, and no offense, but of mostly white, straight people.
Mhm.
And you don't know what you don't know, and it's no offense to those mostly white straight people, but it's really hard to actually do anything for a community if that community is not represented by the people who are actually going to be doing some of those things. So much like what's happened at Western Quebec with the addition of co-opted commissioners, that's what the Lester B. Pearson School Board decided to do prior to the ending of the task force's work. So as Dr. Lashley mentioned, Malik Shahid and myself were added as co-opted commissioners. So what that did gave us a space at the table to be a part of the conversations, didn't have a vote, didn't have full, rights as a commissioner, but still, again, being part of that conversation and being able to sort of start asking the right questions and moving things in the right way. Lucky for us, there was a school board election that was called. And so Malik and I both ran to be full-blown commissioners. So changing our status and then now giving us a vote, giving us a voice, and also representation of our wards, right? So for me, I keep listening to these conversations and I love what I heard is happening at the City of Montreal. It's really, really important to diversify the institutions that are working to fix this problem, right? And I think often I keep hearing like it's really hard to dismantle the master's house with his tools. So we kind of need to sort of change how our institutions look like and have real representation on them in those places where we can actually make real change. So how it's happened at Lester B, we have a much more diverse council now, not just Malik and myself. We have lots of representation from lots of different groups and organizations, and that intersectionality that Dr. Lashley was talking about exists within the members of council. In our meetings and the committees that we head up as commissioners, we are always mindful of equity, diversity, dignity, and inclusion, and do our best to include it on every agenda item, whether it's a conversation about facilities or one specifically about anti-racism, right? So anti-Black racism and racism in general it sneaks its way into different spaces. But again, once you have that sort of representation there to receive it, it, I think, makes things a little bit easier. Are we there yet? No. But I can appreciate the fact that we're on the road to that and having those conversations. The one thing I do want to add, though, that frustrates me as a commissioner or just being a member of an institution is that people always look and want institutions to fix racism. But that's like a very big task. And, institutions are made up of people, and and people are part of this problem as well. So, like Michael says, big words like anti-Black racism and, white supremacy really scares people off of that conversation, and they don't see how they are a part of the solution. And so when I, say to a white colleague, hey, microaggression, and I use that language, it's a very different outcome than if I just have that person-to-person conversation. recognizing that we're both people with power in this institution and that we respect each other and that we can work together to find a solution. So I could say so much more, but I won't. So pass it along.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Now that we sort of heard from all of our panelists, we really want to be able to open it up to those who are non-panelists about it, that, amongst us to ask questions, to pick up on threads that maybe the presenters have talked about, and maybe ask for some elaborations on, on what we may have been talking about. I was asked a question about the idea of streaming, and does streaming still exist? Are schools still not preparing people of color to be able to move on to post-secondary education? Mr. Fleury kind of referred to it, and then certainly Letitia Taylor, we're talking about, what she feels about what's going on is not allowing, not making, young people feel that they should continue with their studies. They're starting to cease and desist and pull away from the institutional structures. I wanted to know, how do people feel about some of those kind of issues that have been raised? And I see you've raised your hand, Allison, so I'll give you the first shot at it.
Thank you so much. So I attended a really fascinating panel a couple of months ago with Tia Collins, who's a doctor out of the University of Ottawa, and she did a study in Quebec with Black families and students looking at streaming, exactly that, and sort of, it was fascinating, and I won't go into all of the details, but very long story short, one of the things that sort of, when we think about racism and it's sort of, it feels like it's something that's done to us, and it's done for evil and bad reasons. What Dr. Collins' sort of research reveals is that a lot of the time school administrators are really well intended. Like, the intention is great. They actually want to help Black families and they want to help these students. And this is the solution proposed by them to help these families. And that, again, is removing sort of those cultural references and all of those important other things that are important in looking at a student and what is best for them. And so streaming does happen, but not for not necessarily as a, people hope that the intention, the intention
not as an
is
institutional plan.
Well, no, not that it's not, it is kind of a plan, but it's not seen as a like the outcome isn't negative. I don't think that the administrators see what they're doing is bad and they don't see the bad outcomes from it, right? I think everyone sort of agrees that we're doing our bad. This is what's best for these students, and not really taking a step back to really examine whether or not that is in fact what is best for that student. And the measures are different, right? White student, Black students, same behavior, one will be streamed and one may not be. And so how do we address that? That's the real problem, right?
But you don't think that it's institutional. You just think it's kind of happenstance that that's going on.
Well, it is institutional, but I just think the outcomes are not intended to be bad ones. They just happen to be, right? So the administrator who's trying to do what's best for this student who's in their class, who's, having this problem, or well, they're not thriving at my, white, awesome school over here. I'm going to put them in this special program where they can, thrive, and maybe they'll be at the top of that class and that'll make them feel better. And again, the intention is good in helping that student, but at the end of the day, that outcome is actually probably not a great one for that student.
Letitia.
Yes, we had, at the beginning of COVID, Parents for Diversity did a lot of online webinars and a series on anti-racist education, and we addressed this issue directly, and so a couple things. It's the motivations, when we say well-intended, it's more like they're not overtly ugly. The intentions or attitude of heart is not overtly ugly, but it's still racist to have lower expectations of our students, to have differential standards of of response to behaviors, to a particular, as Dr. Lashley was talking about, not take into account their intersectionalities if they're having issues, learning issues, to assume that, I heard from an administrator in the National Capital Region who said, there was especially for like newcomer parents from the African diaspora, well, you can't expect parents to come, after hours to, for a parent workshop, or, they just can't help, they just don't, they don't, they don't understand things in the same way. They're not, maybe this isn't a value, education isn't as much a value in their culture. And so what is this madness? I don't know a culture of, African or African descendants that does not value and understand the importance of education. But so when you have limited perspective and understanding of the realities of individuals and communities, then you can come to a conclusion and design programming according to your limited and biased understanding of what is going to be a value and what is a priority. And so this particular school board was working on wanted to offer supports to parents to teach them how to encourage their students to read. And they were surprised, the teachers of the majority culture were surprised that they were walking to school after hours, taking the bus, getting a ride. They were showing up in numbers so that they could learn how to support their students. And there's like,
Children,
it was a revelation. And so, but we need to understand that, and I've often said, I don't think that white folks are sitting in their offices twiddling their fingers, their thumbs, trying to figure out, ooh, how do we, do bad things to Black and brown children? No, but this is how systemic racism works. It's how it operates. It doesn't need you to be intentional anymore. It's already just the way it operates in ways that are deemed objective and neutral, have deleterious consequences and impact on our students.
Dr. Lashley.
Thank you very much. I just want to follow up on that. Is that the whole concept of systemic bias and systemic racism, one of the big problems that I have, as you know, my primary area is in the healthcare field, is that people think they understand, but they don't. And they end up being performative, not because they want to be performative, but because they don't understand that they're being performative. So one of the things that I often ask them, I ask people, how many of you here are Christians? Not because I care who's a Christian, who's not, but I ask them, how many are Christians? Okay, you're a Christian. You have a Christmas tree? Yeah. What color is the angel on the top of your tree? Invariably, they're white. Nobody, and yet there are lots of multicultural angels. What kind of books are you buying for your children? What stories are you telling? Because they don't understand that it has to become embedded as part of their everyday being. They think that if they hold, a quarter of people sit down and come up with a scheme, that it's because they mean well, that is good, but they don't understand that they're seeing it only from well, Fanon talks about the line, that they're seeing it only from their vision above the line. And I want to tell you a quick story with that a child from, well, I'll tell you two quick stories. One from the Lester B and one from Sir Wilfrid.
I got time for one, Myrna, so we
Okay, no, they're going to be really fast. They're intertwined. But I'll tell you, the one at the left at Wilfrid Laurier, for example, in the questionnaire, was one child wrote and said, you punish me for things you're not punishing other people for. You better get on it and punish everybody equally, or I'm going to bust somebody's head open and then you're going to say, I'm the problem. Because the antecedents, what got that child there in that state of anger is not acknowledged. And the same thing happened at Lester B. You take time to get to say the child's name. I can't say the name, it's too difficult. The mother taught me how to say that name in less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, but I mean, I know for a fact, I mean, Letitia's child, her teacher refused to pronounce her name because she thought it was too foreign and didn't pronounce her name, and only pointed to her throughout the school year without giving her the dignity of her name because she said it was too difficult,
Exactly.
to pronounce. So, those are the kinds of concrete examples that we have where, not only do we have some kinds of, institutional biases going on, but we also have to fight individual biases at the same time. And that makes the work doubly hard and the issues doubly important because it affects both our students systemically and as well on a personal level. Alex?
I just wanted to bring context to the conversation, and not to say that I don't agree with what's been said before, but I'm a little hesitant to use labels because labels have a tendency to confine a concept to a particular space and time, but it's so much more. Let's say, for argument's sake, that only 3% of the population is racist. Because I want to bring that point forward because and it's important to understand, if only 3% of the population is racist, and if you have 50,000 or 20,000 teachers, that means that you have about 600 teachers or so in your system that are actually racist and that may do things. And I've seen it. And with 35 years of career, and I know some people did some certain stuff not out of racism, but somehow, how do you put a 14-year-old child outside of a school because he came to a party without a coat and minus 40-degree weather? And you're an educator, and I can never say, and I can stand by all of them and say that they're not all racist, but there is something fundamentally wrong as an educator. If you can take a 14-year-old child, you throw him out in the cold because he shouldn't have been at a school dance, and he's out with a t-shirt. And when I came in and I saw him outside, and I said, what are you doing outside? I brought him back inside, and I never, to this day, I cannot actually understand, because I know there were some very caring teachers around, but they still left him outside. And that's the part that I don't understand. And that's the part that I think it's important to legislate somehow, if we can, to put checks and balances so that minority of people that are allowed to derail our children will not be allowed to do so. I'm just going to give one example, for example, and it's very dear to me because it's my own daughter. When she went to school, although I was a math and physics teacher, she wasn't allowed to take enriched courses for some reason. Even if she got 100% in the first semester in both Sec 4 and Sec 5, she was not allowed to take physics and chemistry. So it's out of resilience that today she is doing her last year to become a doctor. And when she went to the University of Ottawa, she was on the dean's list. So how do you explain that a school administration, after seeing a student get 100% in the first semester twice, still refused to move that child and put her into an enriched class when they know that I, as a father, was able to support my child? I'm still having problem to process these sort of indifferences.
we do and see, these kinds of indifferences, and in the kind of case that you mentioned, we don't seem to see that there's any very strong allyship, that's going on. That it seems like, teachers or administrators are not necessarily standing up and doing what they understand is right, and then trying to change, and then trying in their own way to buck the system. I was talking to a philosophy class today, and I was talking about, about allyship and what needs to happen. I was recounting a story where a friend of mine, a white gentleman who we used to golf together a lot, and he was approached by somebody to become a member of the Royal Montreal Golf Club, and which, as you know, this year is holding the President's Cup. And he said, this guy's a businessman. He said, you seem like a good candidate. And so my friend asked him, he said, well, that's great. He said, but when I have a black friend that I golf with, often referring to me, and he said, would I be able to bring him, to the golf course? And the guy said, oh, sure, you're allowed to have guests and so on. And then he said, well, then would you then help me, or would you assist me and stand up with me to sponsor him for, membership at the club? And the gentleman looked at him squarely in the face and said, I am not a pioneer. Blank, just like that, meaning that even though he knew and understood and would have been accepting of black people in the club himself, he was not going to take on that issue himself, and try to help the system get to understand that there shouldn't be these types of exclusions. And so when we're looking around the school boards, and we're looking at other institutions, the cities and provincial government and the federal government, we don't seem to be able to see, allies that are going to stand up, and from the internal system, try to make some change, try to make some representation. Sorry, of course, it's not a blanket statement that not, I'm sure there are people that are doing this stuff, but we don't see enough of it, and we don't hear it from the other side. People are always saying, well, that's all you guys do is complain, the black community, because we don't hear from other people about, tackling these issues and saying how it is unfair to their co-citizens. So I want to know if there's somebody that would have something to say about that, in terms of what they see or think needs to be done in other ways to be able to support it, so that it's not only the black community or the people of color, bringing this issue to the fore.
May say that I thought of having a black caucus also at different levels in the government to address our concerns. I'm like someone said before, I don't think the others can really represent us when it comes to certain injustice based on our color and our features. So yeah, I would like to see, because I believe that many groups in the world are discriminated and do face segregation and racism, as we know. But they have different caucuses. The Chinese community, for one, I'm sure there's a problem with Chinese people. I do believe they have 5-6 people, able people. I think I had spoken to you about that, Lyndon. So someone should be able to represent the English black community per se, and go see François Legault. As hard as it sounds to be, no, man, we need that. Same thing at the federal level. So that would be one way of also addressing being, we don't stand, we're conditioned in their system. So in that respect, we're also, if we're conditioned, it's like we're in a trap. We play in their thing, and we're not being smart of it. We don't really necessarily unite. I'm looking at, I try to responsabilize ourselves. Right now, you look at the Bob Marley movie, and it's all over the world. So there is a momentum, as commercial as it is, whatever. We can look at many things, but there is a momentum. Things have gotten better. but we need to come together and agree on something. Even though I'm talking for us, but I mean, I would join with anyone that faces discrimination and create a task force to address that. But for the Black community, we don't come enough together and unite and say enough is enough. And that has also meaning we're conditioned in their team to stay divided and to stay aloft and all that. No, we need to shape up. I know, and you said something, Linton, and I'll stop right there after. You said, "Oh, we're known to be always complain." Thank God we only complain, because if we would really, we know that we can't beat them violently. We don't have the power, we don't have the arms, we don't have them things. But we angry. A hungry man is an angry man, right? So in that instance, complaint is the least you can do. You can protest, you can march, you can boycott. I think we need to boycott, maybe to unite around boycotting certain practices, by boycotting their businesses and so on. And again, I'll go back to the caucus, having a Black caucus that can rapidly talk to the media, rapidly talk to different instances in politics. Also, when things go overboard, and things have gone overboard, and we still don't have a caucus.
Yeah, we don't. Well, I can tell you, back in the 90s, I was the author of a proposal about a Black caucus, and it never, it didn't get acceptance amongst our leadership to be able to move it forward. So we still do have work to do. But maybe I'd like to ask Mr. Bordenaro, from the English speaking school board education system. You certainly been aware of the work of Alex Adrian and the other kind of work that other communities, the African Canadian Development and Prevention Network, in terms of how they work with families in the English-speaking school system. Some of the other work that's being done with community groups at English Montreal School Board and in the English sector. Yet we never hear anything from the ABEE about these kinds of problems within the system, and so I'd like to know what it is that at that level where you're at, where you're bringing all the people and you're close to the government sector in terms of interpreting what's happening in the English-speaking community. Have you broached these subjects, and has your committee looked at this issue of trying to, facilitate a better outcomes? Because that's what I think that the board was originally sent there to do, was to create better outcomes and more student success at that level. Yet we seem to think and feel that there are certain sectors of that English-speaking community within the education sector that are being left behind. So I want to know, what's the nature of your discussions at the table around this kind of issue?
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation to this roundtable. The Advisory Board on English Education did prepare a brief on discrimination and diversity in schools. The brief is entitled Prioritizing Student Diversity in Quebec's Education System, if I remember correctly. I'm going to post a link in the chat to this brief. And therefore the Advisory Board has addressed issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I would also like to share an experience in a previous life, that is before I retired from the English Montreal School Board. I was on the advising committee when the MEQ revised the history program. In my experience, the MEQ missed the opportunity to develop a more inclusive curriculum. Without getting into the intricate details, what I can say with a degree of certainty is that the product is lacking because the process is flawed. In short, the process was not inclusive, and much of the feedback at the time was dismissed. Therefore, the MEQ needs to revise how it develops and revises its programs of study. Raphael Gani comes to mind. Raphael Gani at the Université de Laval has compared different approaches, and in my opinion, the Alberta and Ontario models are worthy of consideration. I think another missed opportunity, but I don't have as intimate experience, is the recent CCQ program, Culture et Civilisation du Québec, or Culture and Civilization in Quebec. I think that's another missed opportunity. Once again, we advised the minister, we're an advisory board to the minister, we advised the minister on soliciting feedback, ensuring that the program is inclusive, and once again, to not make the same mistakes with this that is currently being developed to be implemented, currently being piloted, but to be implemented in September of 2024, therefore very, very shortly, not to miss another opportunity to create a model that is based on a process that is more inclusive, and a product that therefore should, by the nature of the process, become more inclusive. We can't afford to continue to miss these opportunities. That's the kind of advice that the advisory board has been giving the minister directly, and therefore the ministry. But we're an advisory board. Our mandate is to advise the minister. We have no authority to oblige the ministry or to implement any such policy. So, we participate in the work in progress, but the decisions are not ours to make.
Mhm. Well, I appreciate that you would, put the link to the study, to your report,
I'll do it momentarily.
in the chat so that people can refer to it and see. We do have amongst us a gentleman who's been widely respected in terms of the research and that he's done over the years in Quebec, and particularly around the English-speaking community and population studies and language studies and so on. And I'm talking about Professor Richard Bourris. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Bourris, in terms of the work that you've done, the studies that you've done, and so on, how much have that have the research and the work that you've done, how much of it has touched on racism, and particularly racism in Quebec? And and to where have you presented either your findings or your research, where it may have possibly had an effect? I know the English-speaking school boards have done a lot with you, QCGN, those kinds of English-speaking groups. But I'm wondering, in terms of looking at the whole idea of racism and within your research, where have you touched on that, and how much of importance has it been as a part of your work?
Okay, there's the straight academic work that we do in universities. As in my case, as social psychologist, we publish in journals about all types of sort of how racism is maintained, how it's propagated, how it's then deconstructed. So there's a lot of fundamental research being carried, so that takes up a lot of the time. And there's also the class work when I've been giving lectures in social psychology of prejudice and discrimination. So we hit a certain proportion of the students that happen to take our courses, and that's a very academic response. One thing that has helped a bit was, for example, we did something. I was a consultant for La Leçon de Discrimination, which was very, which was based on the Eye of the Storm. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes.
Okay, the Eye of the Storm.
Yeah.
Divided the class between blue eyes and brown eyes. So we did it tall and shorts in Saint-Hyacinthe, and that in Saint-Hyacinthe, Quebec, but with tall and short. And that Radio-Canada special program, this Enjeu documentary of about 50 minutes, that's had more impact than what a poor academic, tries to do every day and with the students, because that's had a lot of, it's had the best, it won the best documentary in the world in 2017.
Wow.
Oddly enough, it was never, so this is funded by the Radio-Canada, but CBC never thought it was a good idea to either subtitle the story this documentary. But we've had it subtitled, and it's been used by hundreds of thousands of students at in Ontario school boards, in the French school boards, in the Canadian Army. So it's only it's a way of accelerating within a very short period of time some sort of awareness amongst, let's say, a group of people who we have to talk with about, how do they acquire racist ideas, how they categorize us and them, how they dehumanize, etc. So the program is to try to get them in that intersectionality. We're trying to get them towards that. But in order to soften them up, these are children that are discriminated against each other, and that gets to their heart. So that's a way of and a lot of NGOs have told us that this 50 minutes saves them about a day of work to just get majority members sensitive about in-groups and out-groups and how some groups are devalued relative to others. So sometimes we do something and we don't know what it's going to happen to it, but as it happens, this one has been and it's still on YouTube. You can just type la leçon de discrimination and you'll find it. And so that's what kind of happens. Sometimes we've had at UQAM, like the Human Rights Commission, you have to report on the number of professors that we hire from different cultural communities. And of course, at UQAM now, I have more than 20% of the students that are from first and second generation immigrants. So we have a lot of diversity in the students, but we still haven't reached the diversity in the professor and even support staff at UQAM. And so there's so much work to be done in on that front, just to bring it up to fair representation. So it's just many life's works commitments to just get things moving. So so we're not frontline, I'm not frontline, I'm academic, and we try to push it a little bit every now and then. We try to do it, but it's just we need more people who continue the struggle for that. And of course, when we have allies, well, it's good to have allies from all cultural backgrounds for those noble causes of, getting the diversity going to represent what's happening really in Quebec. That takes a while.
Well, you're not you're not wrong. A number of us have been at it for many years. We tried to do this. Well, thank you. I see that you put it in the chat. And anybody who's not seen that movie, Eye of the Storm, with Jane Elliott.
Yeah.
All right, and it's a story of a woman who was a teacher who in an all-white community, and one day one of her students came in to her and said, teacher, they shot a king last night. Why did they shoot a king? And of course, there was a reference to the death of Martin Luther King. And then she realized in this whole white community that she had, kids had no connection to anything that was affecting the lives of people of color or many of the communities around them. So she divided the class into blue eyes and brown eyes. And one day the blue eyes were on the top, the next day the brown eyes were on top. And she documented how even one day where kids felt discrimination against them lowered their self-esteem, their marks, their participation in class, and left them sometimes emotionally crippled because their friends could no longer play with them because of the color of their eyes. And then she does and continues to conduct those kinds of things, with experience with adults, and you got to see the anger of these adults about getting mistreated as they perceive because of the color of their eyes. It's absolutely incredible. And people then come out with a better understanding what discrimination is all about. Letitia.
Yes, I wanted to, drill down on this question of allyship. And I think on the one hand, we could say, well, we need, there needs to be more education so that, people just they don't necessarily understand. And so, maybe just a little more education. And I would say that it's never a bad thing. I'm not going to say no to that. And there are some wonderful resources out there. But W.E.B. Du Bois, I believe he was the first Black man to get a PhD from Harvard many years ago. He started out, I think, in the 1920s, saying the same thing. It's just that, white folks, they just don't understand that if we just explain it, if they just have more information, if they can just, and so he set about, trying to do that in ways that, a PhD from Harvard maybe would have a little more entree in doing. And I don't know if it was 20 or 30 years later, he came to the conclusion, no, it's not a lack of understanding or a lack of education or a lack of information. It is there is a fundamental unwillingness to give up positions and privileges of power. And what my experience has been is that while people's hearts might be moved when they witness, Black people being the object of violence or of some sort of aggression or discrimination, there's that rational calculation of, am I going to expose myself to negative consequences if I speak up, if I intervene, if I advocate? And they have the choice. They don't have to. It's not an existential necessity, or it's not perceived to be one. I would argue that what I've often said is that Black and brown people can't get free until white people get healed. So I would say it is an existential priority and need for them as well. But in the meantime, we also have a rational calculation to make. And just thinking about what Michael said, it came to me, and then pulling together, weaving that together with this new curriculum, culture and civilization, wowzer, that's going to be imposed on our children, and that has been developed. There was I think the opportunity was once again missed to be inclusive and to be to reflect all of the diversity and experiences and perspectives of Quebec citizens. So I'm wondering, I've had it put to me, a question put to me by the administration, because I've said, there's certain aspects of that already I see coming, and I'm not going to have my child exposed to that. And so the one who is in grade school. And so they're saying, but, it's going to be, mandatory curriculum. It's going to be, and I've said, well, either she can be excused or you can give her a 0. I am talking about boycotting, as Michael suggests. I'm talking about boycotting a class with content and curriculum that, by its erasure or by its inclusion of things that are inaccurate, I'm prepared for my daughter to either have an alternate, be given an alternate assignment, or if you insist, then give her a 0, but send her out. And I guess then they're like, oh, but Ms. Taylor, I was like, well, I'll just have to, explain it on her university application as to why she got a 0 in 6th grade ethics or, civilization and culture class. Oh, that's right. They don't care. They don't care. So we have to we have to make that rational calculation about what counts and what, what are the consequences that we're willing to endure in order to say, no, here's a boundary, respect it. These are our children. And, the fact that they are in public school does not mean that you get to, run social experiments or just, do anything, do or say anything that may not be in the interests of their integrity and of their
well-being.
well-being. And so that's my job as a parent, to set those frontiers, and it's your job as an educator, so-called, to respect that. Because I'm the first educator, and there may be families in which parents aren't leading, but as long as I'm leading in my child's life, if there's I'm going to try to stay on side and be on side with the school. I need the school to be a reliable partner in my child's education. But if we come to an impasse, fall in line behind me, because I'm leading. And it is not for you to override and overrule because your concept, your understanding of civilization is so narrowed. But because you're in a position of power, you can impose your vision and your perspective around civilization and culture. I think it would be good if we had allies and we had those of us in the community who are prepared to say, it's sixth grade, culture and education, don't need it, and we can keep it moving.
Well, it's
Still, our viewpoints are taken into account.
It's interesting you bring that point up. I think the religion course, people are allowed to opt out because of their personal views, and they don't necessarily get a zero on it, maybe because it's an elective rather than one of the core courses. But it's still that people do have that power to do that. Why can't we do that with other subject matter? Brian.
Yes, I want to take this opportunity to thank people for being here this evening, and especially Rosemary Murphy, the president, and Carol Mindel, the executive director of QFHSA, for allowing their Zoom facilities to be used this evening, and also on Friday with the visit of Dr. Jean Augustine, Friday afternoon, who visited schools in the Western Quebec School Board. I'd also like to thank David Cromwell, the Director of Operations and Technology for Coffee Quebec and ComECH-QC, and of course Linton Garner for his wonderful moderation again this evening. Linton is always there when we need him, so thank you. And I really thought this evening was wonderful, and thank all 28 of you for being here. And I'll leave it for Linton to finish off the evening. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian. Well, first of all, yeah, this has been a great evening for discussion. I'd really like to see if we could, we would be able to do this again and focus on things like Michael has talked about a caucus, and energy put together by the Black community to be able to, make representations about ourselves. With those educators that are around the table, to be able to ask questions, in their own milieus about what we're doing about racism and what and looking around, and rather than saying why, saying why not, and questioning why that can't be a part of what it is that we look at when we're looking at the educational system, and as means of being able to improve our aspects of delivery of education to every single student, under our jurisdiction. Because if young people are not hearing, feeling, thinking, and seeing reflections of them within the system, are we really educating them? And are we really doing the best we can to make sure that they grow up in a sense of wholeness, which all of our other educational practices are seemingly aimed at. Educators are so fond of saying, we're looking after the whole student, their intellectual aspect, their social aspect, their this and that. Well, there are pockets of those populations that they serve where they're not doing that for, either because they're deliberately, not doing, or they don't know how to do that. And either way, it's the students who are suffering, and so we need to correct that in some way, shape, or form, and we need allies to be able to stand up to do that positively, so that we can make those kind of corrections. I do want Mr. Bourris, if you can give us a link in the chat to your documentary. I would really be interested in seeing that done in the Quebec context, and see how we can get that maybe introduced into other jurisdictions and school boards, so that that can be used as one of the teaching tools that we see. And then those of you who as well, who are other educators who have tools, ways, and means, and are aware of things, to please communicate that to, say, for instance, Carol Mindel, who's the executive director of the Quebec Federation of Homeless School Associations, so she can circulate it through the network, and we can become aware of some of those tools. And then finally, I do want to thank the QFHSA, Brian Rock and Dave Cromwell, but I especially want to thank all of those who were our panelists and the guests here tonight for giving up their evening to discuss this important issue. And it's not only because it's Black History Month, but because people were genuinely interested. Natasha, I saw your hand up. Was there something you wanted to say?
No, I was just clapping.
Oh, that's great. And thank you. And if there's anybody that would have any kind of last words that they would like to bring to the table, I'd certainly entertain that without hesitation. Dr. Lashley.
I just want to say that this concept of what's happened in the school carries through into higher education. So the seed really is being sown here. I mean, I teach at McGill in the health department in transcultural psychiatry, and we deal with all these issues, a lot of these issues that take place with these kids in school. It carries through into the generational trauma, and we have to deal with them there. And it also goes into how we teach medicine. It's only lately that we are teaching dermatologists about Black skin, for example, and how we do diagnosis and those kinds of things. So I just want to say that we can't overemphasize the necessity for a good start at the educational level at this age.
All right, thank you very much. Any final words as we wrap up? I know there are a number of people that were here that didn't say anything. Here's your opportunity to say something. Allison, you're still muted, dear.
Sorry about that. No, I was just clapping. I just wanted to say thank you very much for this wonderful panel. And I think these conversations are good to have them regularly, not just within Black History Month, and finding ways that we can all be allies together in working on this. And as Dr. Lashley in the task force report, the tagline was putting every learner first. And I think that's what guides me in the work that I do. Just try to remember my kid, my son, me. in how I do what I do. So thank you for convening us all tonight.
Well, thank you all. Thank you for being with us. It was so nice to see so many familiar faces. And here's hoping that you all will be going out and spreading the word about what it is that we need to do and how we need to do it, and that there are allies out there that can be of helpful resources, whether at the community level, like Michael like Michael at Youth in Motion, whether it's at the institutional level, like Dr. Lashley and certainly Dr. Sarkar, in terms of of the things that they do, whether it's at the school board level, like Allison and Gail and Letitia. And then whether it's with, this parents network, this very formidable network of the Quebec Federation of Home and School Associations, please, call on them to be able to, connect you with people and resources that can continue to, create what we want to see and the outcomes that we want to see, and keep it going. Thank you very much for your participation this evening, everyone. Much appreciated for your attendance.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir à tous.
Ms. Elizabeth, thank you very much.